Welcome to Delegate Report, April of this current year. O thou who art the Lord of Lords, I testify that thou art the Lord of all creation and the educator of all beings, visible and invisible. I bear witness that thy power hath encompassed the entire universe, and that the host of the earth can never dismay thee, nor can the dominion of all peoples and nations deter thee from executing thy purpose. I confess that thou hast no desire except the regeneration of the whole world and the establishment of the unity of its peoples and the salvation of all them that dwell therein. Baha'u'llah. Much of the content in past has come from hero note takers at the National Convention, someone who has the ability to listen and type at the same time. This year, there's a group of delegates who brought up a Google Doc, and they were all inputting throughout the entire 4 days, and it was a wonderful resource to draw from. But as you might expect, the result is not necessarily accurate, like Pilgrim's notes. The U.S. is a big place. These are the boundaries of the 13 regions in the United States. Remember, they started with 4. The 4 regions cited by Abdu'l-Baha in the Tablets of the Divine Plan. The number of regions has increased to 13 now. We are the Atlantic region. There are 919. How did it work out that way? Local spiritual assemblies in the U.S., and this map shows them by region. We have 89 in the Atlantic region. Some of the bigger parts of the country have much fewer. They are very sparsely populated. This is a map of the electoral units in the United States that produce the 171 delegates. Our Unit 17 is right there. You can see its size. All of Montana, 1 delegate from that whole area. Here's the math in the upper right-hand corner. According to the annual report of the National Assembly, 77,000 Baha'is in the U.S. with known addresses. Divide that by 171 delegates. You come up with 455 Baha'is per electoral unit. There's some office at the National Center that tries to keep track of this as people move around, as there's growth, and reapportion parts or all over time as necessary. Look at our little unit, and now I'm going to zoom in. This was the map of our unit a year ago, 2025. There were 6 clusters. On the western shore, there was a Western Shore cluster, Prince George's, and then there's St. Mary's Charles. They've stayed the same, but on the eastern shore in Delaware, they've changed. I'm going to click ahead to watch the screen to 2026. There it goes. You saw it change. I'm going to go back 2025, ahead 2026. The central Delmarva cluster went away, replaced by something called Prospective Atlantic. It's not a cluster, and it will show up as a white space in some of the maps. So there's 5 clusters now. If you wanted to find articles, videos, and audios about the National Convention, you would log in to the national website as usual. In the upper right, click on Profile and My Profile, and you will find the button with the maps. You can check out your unit boundaries, locality boundaries, and regional boundaries from that button. You would find this screen with 118th Convention title. When you click on this coverage of the convention, you come to this page, which has 8 articles with photos on the left. It has 4 videos that you can watch in total and 22 audio tracks. None of them are from the counselors. They're all from delegates. The National Convention serves at least 4 purposes: to elect the National Assembly, second, to arrive at full and complete knowledge of the current conditions, problems, and possibilities of the faith in this country, which I summarize as where we are. Third, to give the incoming National Assembly the benefit of the collective wisdom, guidance, and constructive suggestions of the assembled delegates, which I would say is where we could go. And fourth, to contribute to the unity and spirit and action of the entire Baha'i community, which I believe is the reports like we're having now, where we bring the message back. For the 4th year, the National Center has had Zoom prep sessions for delegates, allowing new delegates to understand what they're going to encounter, and others like myself to see what might have changed. And they provided 2 gift books as we registered. The one on the left, Baha'i Sacred Writings, brings together hundreds of selections from the writings of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha, commissioned by the House of Justice to allow each Baha'i home to have a copy. It is hot off the press. The booklet on the right, from the Baha'i Office of Public Affairs, grew out of a multi-year, multi-faith dialogue on how religion and faith communities can contribute to overcoming racism. And Mr. Bowers will speak to that in a little bit. Delegates stay in Skokie at Doubletree by Hilton, and the delegate prep session is in the top floor. I put a little heart there. It's a beautiful ballroom. Every day we are bused to the house of worship 5 miles in the morning and back in the evening. This is the list of all 171 delegates in alphabetical order by last name. The number 171 was derived by multiplying 9 times 19. Day 1, Thursday, the delegate prep session at the hotel in the morning for 3 hours, then to the house of worship, 2 o'clock devotional program, convention opens in Foundation Hall, seating of the delegates, election of officers, organization of the convention, and then the reading of the Rizwan message and consultation, followed by the video of the National Institutional Gathering in Pensacola, Florida. You'll see that. Then a video honoring Mr. Mitchell, who passed away at that time, had been very recently. I'm not going to show you that video, but you can watch it on YouTube. And after a 12-hour day, we adjourn. The counselors, always present at the convention, always 2. This year, Billy Silva, who is a veteran counselor, and Vafa Akhtar Kavari, who is newly appointed. Delegate preparation session in that beautiful ballroom on the top floor of the hotel, 3 hours. Prep session on how to be an elector. This works in any Baha'i election. We used a compilation called the National Spiritual Assembly, Baha'i Electoral Process, and Consultation. We used it last year also. It's excellent. Pictures from the delegate prep session. Somebody said this: we are building consensus, not compromise. I like that. Somebody said, make your delegate report accessible to friends of the faith. Hopefully I am doing that, and that the video that I'll make could be used in that way also. I have posted on the Greenbelt Baha'i Community YouTube channel my delegate reports for the past 4 years. They are bottled and can be looked at. This particular part, the prep session, the last 2 have a lot of good details in them, which I'm not going to repeat here. We're in the bus. We're arriving at the house of worship. It's a beautiful spring day in Wilmette. Someone caught me carrying my briefcase up the steps to go into the house of worship. We begin with a devotional program in the auditorium, then down to Foundation Hall for the organization of the convention. Again, no guests for delegates. The National Assembly has some guests. Counselors and the National Assembly members are present at all sessions. This is a consultation with the National Assembly. This is new. A letter from the National Assembly to the convention presented by National Assembly member Nanaba Khan Foguth. I couldn't find a way to summarize it. In many indigenous frameworks, a feather is not merely presented by a person, but is formally invited to center the sanctity of speech. Accordingly, your National Assembly has invited the eagle feather to serve as a sacred talking piece for this national convention. The eagle signifies the eagle nation as the bird that flies highest and closest to the Creator. It is the messenger between the people and the divine. Holding its feather reminds each speaker to offer words that are truthful, courageous, and aligned with the divine will, symbolizing the high-mindedness, strength, and spiritual clarity required to consult on the affairs of the cause. This practice places vision and wisdom within the collective integrity of the circle, allowing us to see the big picture while enabling those gathered to yield a deeper vision through a spirit of unity and wholehearted cooperation. Regarding the placement, instead of a hand-to-hand handoff, like a talking stick, the feather is placed on a red cloth to signify that authority belongs to the convention as a whole, representing the institutions of the faith, rather than to any single attendee. In this way, the feather is not merely a tool, but a witness that facilitates our accountability to the intercession of the ancestors, the concourse on high, and the land itself. Through this process, an increasing distinction will be seen in the people fulfilling the promised glory of the world order of Baha'u'llah, the system destined to fulfill the highest expectations of humanity. Letter from our National Assembly. And that feather is at the front through the entire convention. Election of convention officers. Tellers are introduced. Chief teller gives instructions, balloting for chair and then secretary. Those elected: Chair David Young from Oregon, Secretary Muin Afnani from California. In the lower left, it's incidental but consequential that there are 4 members of the outgoing National Assembly who are delegates this year: Muin Afnani, Timothy Conley, June Thomas, David Young. The convention that I have attended, every one of them has chosen National Assembly members who are also delegates to be the officers of the convention, perhaps feeling that they know more what's going on and can do those jobs. Dr. Young's first words upon his election, he said, "The times in which we meet are a perfect time for spiritual conference on what it is that we can do next to answer the call of the Lord." Then he proceeds to the business. One of the first things he does is name the team to develop a letter from the convention to the House of Justice, and you'll see them in a little while. Then the convention decides on its procedures, and I put this all in small print, lower right, but it takes about 2 hours. We work on the agenda, the time limits, the reporting of the election results, the procedure for consultation, ... When you have a break, you can go to the National Archives exhibit. A special exhibit of the U.S. National Baha'i Archives, including sacred relics, original letters, and photographs, is prepared each year for convention attendees. The archives is in the lower level of the temple near Foundation Hall. You have noticed in your feast reports from the National Treasurer information about a permanent, larger archives location. This is going to be in Wheeling, Illinois, a building owned by the National Assembly that is being renovated. It will be fitted with modern climate control, fire protection, security, and mobile shelving systems. Last year, I reported that permitting was underway. That has been finished. Construction is to begin soon. The picture in the upper right shows the storage area that Archives has now. If you look past these bookshelves, there's more bookshelves, and it's really quite dense in the basement of the House of Worship. The cornerstone, symbolically laid by Abdu'l-Baha in 1912 at the ceremony to dedicate the temple site, located just a few steps outside Foundation Hall. Arts devotional program by region, year 2. The inspiration, the words on the left, June Thomas introducing the Pensacola video, which you'll see. She says, "Some of us were so inspired by the feel of Pensacola." This is a meeting with 500 Baha'is, which was enlivened and illumined by magnificent regional devotions where a region would be asked to get up and were given, in some cases, 30 minutes to share their spirits and hearts. And so we thought we could do that at the National Convention. So we did. In March, a month before the convention, I received this email from Alphonse Nicholas from Woodbridge and Swati Justice from Greensboro announcing that they were to help us organize. It was going to be 10 to 15 minutes from the Atlantic states delegates. The main difference between last year's, because this is year 2, is last year there was just 4 devotionals, and this year there's 10 devotionals, but there's 13 regions. So we're paired up in some cases, Florida and Prairie states, Heartland and Midwest states. You can make some new friends, but Atlantic states, we're by ourselves. We're up first. The Atlantic States devotional kicks off the convention. Barbara Talley reads her poem written for this occasion. Jerry Lynn Peake leads the movement devotional. The narrator begins his script. Dear divine concourse and noble ancestors, help us transcend our limitations and give us the courage to speak God's truth. Let us shine the light of fellowship, love, and harmony that will guide this nation towards racial unity and foster world peace. Those devotionals were quite popular. The reading of the 2026 Rizwan message from the House of Justice followed by consultation. The readers are reading and everyone else is paying attention. They probably have read it several times already, making notes, considering what comments they might offer. The counselor begins the consultation. I'm going to share some of what he said. Now begins the second greater phase of the 9-year plan. Never has the path forward been clearer. The central aim is to release the society-building powers in ever greater measures. He relates a story. I was in Philadelphia this past weekend where I met with a group of about 15 youth in West Philadelphia. These youth are serving communities in many ways familiar to us as children's class teachers, junior youth animators, and others sharing the Word of God with their families. We had a youth night, and I decided to ask these youth, how has your life changed as a result of these efforts? What transformation have you seen? And I wanted to share with you a few of their reflections, and there's 7. First, being part of this process has allowed me to know my community. Otherwise, I'd be in my room all day. Second, this community is the only place that I feel welcome and able to share my thoughts more clearly. The Baha'i community has given me the capacity to serve my community and make it a better place. I've grown in patience. I'm inspired. I've come out of my comfort zone. I decided to become a teacher because of these efforts, because I want to serve others. There's a good energy here. I can't describe it, but it helps me make sense of the world around me. This process has given my life purpose. A lot of delegates get up and give comments. This one stood out. This is Annalise Carter, Arlington, Texas, on the topic applying creativity and flexibility. In the lower left, you need this definition. She's going to mention Dungeons and Dragons, which you'll, in the next 3 minutes, know more about maybe than you ever have. She's going to mention NPC, which stands for non-player character, and it refers to any background character like a shopkeeper or townsfolk that you, the player, do not control.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some inspiration that we got as a community, and particularly I got as a person, from Counselor Bodie a little bit ago that really speaks to the conviction and the certainty that we have as Baha'is, and that is that we know the material, we know the principles, we know all the things we need to know. So now is the time for creativity and flexibility and how we apply those activities. So in my community, I was a little bit stuck. I've been a children's class teacher for many, many years, and I've done grade 1 about 2 dozen, 3 dozen times, many times. And my process to becoming unstuck began with 4 little boys that we wanted to start a children's class with. I went to the families, we had a discussion, I brought some crafts for them to just get a feel for some of the things we might do, and they were not having any of the crafts. So we needed to change the perspective, change what we're doing. So I had meetings with each of the families to ask, well, what are they interested in? And it was pretty unanimous with that age group. It was anime and video games. All right, I can work with this. So I began the process of Dungeons and Dragoning my grade 1 class. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, it is a tabletop game where you just need dice and your imagination. And generally, groups of people work together on adventures, and they make decisions together, and they fight bad guys. But in this case, we're not fighting anyone. This is still a Baha'i class. So instead of that, we're cleaning hearts. And I had always had a little bit of struggle with any of my children's classes with memorizing the quotes. We go over the quotes, we work on them, but week to week, sometimes we forget them. It's fine. But so instead of magic spells to clean the bad guys, we now had the quotes that they had to have memorized in order to use those spells. And we used their parents, which regularly came to the classes and sat in. They were now the tavern owners that were telling the stories of Abdul-Baha, a man from far away. We used them to be kings and queens that were having problems with truthfulness or trustworthiness or whatever it was that week that we were learning about. So they were getting a bit of a chance to do and practice those virtues immediately. If we're talking about love, then you better believe there was going to be an NPC, non-playable character, a person there, who is going to be annoying them intentionally. And they better, I hope, they're going to be still loving to them. That was the general hope. And it was a lovely, lovely breaking out of a box because I felt safe in the knowledge and the principles that we share.
Video from the National Institutional Gathering in Pensacola. The group photograph, it was held in January of this year in Pensacola, Florida, shortly after the December 2025 Conference of the Counselors at the World Center. More than 500 people from all 13 regions gathered to build unity of vision among the institutions and agencies. In the lower right, the words that June Thomas used in introducing the film. She said, "The counselors, familiar with those at the forefront of knowledge in the regions, invited the friends to share experiences from their home clusters. These dear friends would stand up and say the most amazing things, cluster after cluster after cluster."
So the Triangle Cluster has a population of about 1.5 million, and one of the things that we're really learning about now, in order to really be able to reach that 1.5 million people, is about informal and formal arrangements of support.
Phoenix is one of the more advanced clusters in the Four Corners region. There's over 500 activities at the moment with about 2,500 participants and a little over 300 protagonists. In the last year, there was definitely a raised consciousness that in our effort to do things at the neighborhood level, we had neglected a cluster level system.
After we did a very deep analysis and deep reading of the reality of this particular cluster, but also the entire grouping of clusters, we came up with some very important capacities that needed to be developed across our entire grouping of clusters. And so we decided that the best way to address this and to make sure that everyone was really experiencing this learning together was to develop a series of seminars that address these capacities.
So we started, the three of us, really seeing this process as one, like all of us were in it. It wasn't about roles, oh, okay, you're the regional coordinator, you're the whatever. Like all of us worked together to think about these 4 centers of intense activity. There was almost weekly conversations with each of these nuclei.
Coming from Memphis, Tennessee, so we had to think about what did it mean to strengthen the Baha'i identity of the whole community, because there's friends who have already declared but have weak Baha'i identity, and then friends who are on the threshold, but they also need a strengthening of a Baha'i identity. And so I think the first step we took is that we tried to listen to concerns, just took note of things that emerged in conversations. And there were 2 prominent issues that we identified. One is this statement or this idea that the moral standards of the faith are too high. Christianity is easier. And so to address this, we just started having Bible studies at the Institute House. We spent time studying the teachings of Christ, particularly the Sermon on the Mount, and the youth saw very quickly that the moral standards of true Christianity were also very challenging.
There are 200 to 400 individuals who are currently contributing to the imperatives in some way. There are 98 junior youth in the program and 60 children in the program. So 5 youth are currently serving on the LSA who have been raised up through the Institute. Several of these are youth who've gone through all the junior youth text and graduated through all the Ruhi courses and who have been able to vote. And so now there are 6 to 7 voting youth in the population, and 8 who have recently declared.
Maybe something that would be really nice if we asked some of these friends to describe even their transformation going through this process of rhythms and the consistency and how it's allowed them to transform and see their community transform.
My transformation, I've noticed that the Institute has helped me with my problem-solving skills, breaking down things and learning how to add like more context to things and read the context to it. It also helped me like look at things up from a different perspective outside my own perspective. And it's given like me and my friends like a baseline of thinking, helping them figure out that every action has a purpose.
For my transformation, I started with the JY program, and I was not the best behaved child. But as you know, everyone got their own paces and strides they move in, and like different ways they need to be accommodated. And you know, growing up, I didn't feel like I had that until I joined the JY program, and then I met Fita and a bunch of other friends that made me feel like I had like a place that I was welcome at, and my voice could be heard.
A little bit about my transformation that I seen, like noticed within myself, is like articulation and like my vocabulary expanding. And another one is like the transformation of my family. So like I've invited like most of my family and I just see like we like consult more, and about us having like 8 declared youth has recently been changed to 9 because Thank you.
Doors open and God is guiding us, and God is guiding us when we make an effort. Doors open and God is guiding us, and God is guiding us when we work together.
Then we were able to work with 150 children and junior youth through collaboration with these organizations. Or schools say, wow, we're seeing the impact of this program. We want a group in our schools. And now it's a question of not, do we have the animators for it? But actually, we have so many animators. How are the schools going to provide enough junior youth?
The other thing that comes to mind is that we have to disseminate the learning to the deepest level of the grassroots. So thinking about that single animator, he has to come to know what it is that we're discussing in this meeting. When we get home, actually, when we left, they were really sad that we were going to be gone for 4 days. So then they were like, no, we'll pick you up. We're arriving late at night. So they said, when you arrive, you have to debrief us about what was going on in the meeting so that we know what we're doing, so that we know where we need to get Las Vegas to. So that's a product of the weekly pattern of learning. First, we have to engage in it so that when someone new is met, they understand that this is the nature of the process that they are being invited to join. And then they assimilate very easily into the patterns and activity of the community life. And then they're able to contribute to it in their own way. Otherwise, they believe that the children's class is the ultimate end, or they don't understand that there's a process that they themselves contribute to. They feel like they're a participant. So from the very beginning, they were doing that, and then now they find it natural to say, okay, there's this big meeting, whatever, that you're going to. We need to know what's going on, and they feel ownership also.
Therefore, thee to bow down thy head in submission and put thy trust.
Memorial for Glenford Mitchell. There was a 9-minute video played. I'm not going to share it here, but it is available on YouTube. Search for Memorial for Glenford E. Mitchell. On the right is the message from the House of Justice. The passing of Glenford E. Mitchell from this earthly plane robs the Baha'i world of an illustrious, accomplished, deeply spiritual servant of Baha'u'llah. We mourn the loss of our dearly loved former colleague with sorrowful hearts, calling to mind his penetrating powers of insight and uncommon good sense, to which he harnessed his compelling command of language, a combination of rare qualities that answered to so many demands during his membership of the Universal House of Justice. In the middle, I've put together a list of dates because I want to show his presence in our area. He was born in Jamaica in 1935. In 1957, he came to Raleigh, North Carolina, and got a degree at Shaw University. In 1960, went to New York City and got a degree at Columbia University. In 1964, he came to Washington, D.C., He was a professor at Howard University, and he was also the chair of the Washington, D.C. Local Spiritual Assembly. In '68, he was elected to the National Spiritual Assembly and became the secretary, which he served as for 14 years. In 1982, he was elected to the Universal House of Justice. He and his wife, Bahá'í, went to Israel. He served there for 26 years, and he stepped down in 2008. My memory is they came back to Maryland and were in this area most of those years, except for the last maybe 4 or 5 years in Atlanta near their daughter. I have pictures at the bottom with members of our National Spiritual Assembly and with members of the House of Justice. Friday is going to include the annual reports of the Secretary of the National Assembly and the Treasurer of the National Assembly, which includes questions from the floor and responses. And then the rest of the day is consultation on focused topics. Many came from the Pensacola Conference, the movement of clusters, a steady flow of diverse participants, and the connection to race unity, insights from the efforts of institutions. Kenneth Bowers, the Secretary of the National Assembly, notes the honor of being entrusted by the National Assembly to carry out the daunting assignment of giving voice to the institution's thoughts and sentiments. He said, "I did make the decision this morning to call in some special reinforcements," referring to the late Glenford Mitchell, to whom he dedicated the report, saying he was a wonderful soul and a great role model to me. Mr. Bowers begins by describing a community protected and guided through the power of a covenant, undaunted and indivisible in the face of tests, mystic at its heart, scientific in method, united in vision, infinitely diverse in expression, tested and matured by a century and a half of unparalleled experience, increasingly manifesting the transformative powers latent in the Word of God for today, keenly aware of the trials that humanity must face before it realizes its destiny, and yet serenely confident of ultimate victory. Mr. Bowers assumes that we've already read this 184-page document, the printed annual report. On the right, the chapters in that book report from the desk. There's a learning desk, the race unity desk. Each of the desks has its report from the year, the statistics of the national community. And each of the 13 regional Baha'i councils has its 3 or 4 pages where it tells its story, among other parts of the book. Mr. Bowers speaks for 51 minutes. You can watch that entire video on the National Convention web page. I am going to share 21 minutes in 3 segments. The first one, topics are assessment of the outside world on the development of the Baha'i community, and a second topic, our ecosystems of learning. Mr. Bowers.
So friends, we had the opportunity yesterday to think together about this beautiful Rezvan message from our beloved Universal House of Justice. And as we recall, the House of Justice begins its message to us for the first 3 paragraphs from its own perspective about the developments that have taken place in the Baha'i world over the course of the past few years leading up to the present moment. And how beautifully and wonderfully they assess the rising capacities of the Baha'i community and the characteristics of this community now beginning to flourish throughout the entire world. But then at the top of page 2, I found it very interesting. In paragraph 4, they suddenly shift perspective and they begin to talk about the assessment of the outside world, the greater world, on the development of the Baha'i community. But there too, it is quite extraordinary what the House of Justice has to say about the impact in the consciousness of others that this emerging Baha'i community is now beginning to have. It's worth repeating, so if you don't mind, I'd like to read part of that paragraph again. Many in the wider society, writes the Universal House of Justice, who encounter the grassroots activity of Baha'is are struck by its distinctive characteristics. It springs from a sincere concern for the well-being of all. It is oriented towards unity and service, and it follows clear principles, yet does not presume to have an immediate answer to every problem. In a spirit of common endeavor, Baha'is seek to collaborate with others and to learn together. And in the relationships they form with those who occupy positions of authority and responsibility in society, they are earnest and clear-sighted. They pursue social change without political ambition or self-interest, And they recognize that as the prominence of the faith rises, it becomes important to ensure that its true character and aims are well understood. Now, it's indeed the case that in recent years, the world has begun to take greater notice of the Baha'i community. No doubt, many of you have experienced very similar things, and some of them, no doubt in our own experience, are quite extraordinary, and maybe we'll even hear some examples of that. Just a few days ago, a particularly striking example of just such an observation was submitted on Reddit by a Substack writer. He's very clear to say he is not a Baha'i, by the way, elsewhere. I'm not a Baha'i. I know some Baha'is, but I'm not a Baha'i. That's all he says about that. And he also, quite clearly in this column, shows that he's pretty allergic to the idea of organized religion. But notwithstanding that, this is what he has to say about the Baha'is, the Baha'i community. It's distributed and decentralized, with no clergy, no dominant nation state, no missionary class. It's multi-generational, with planning horizons that stretch decades into the future. It's intercultural and trans-religious, capable of transmitting shared values across the world's deepest divides. It explicitly rejects the superstitious and irrational. It's propositional rather than oppositional, choosing to demonstrate rather than decry. And he concludes, the Baha'is have created a living, breathing, planetary-scale prototype, one grounded in spiritual principles, but oriented toward material justice and systemic transformation. Now, friends, this is an amazing statement to be made by an observer in the West, in North America, as a matter of fact. And it's remarkable to think that such distinctive characteristics of the faith can already be seen, because from our perspective, often, I think you would agree with me, we think more about not the road we have traveled, but not the hills and the valleys and so on that we've already traversed, but the Himalayan peak of achievement that's still staring in front of us, right? So it's what we haven't done that occupies our mind. And it's true, the Universal House of Justice bears that out in the sense, of course, they always ask us to appreciate where we've come and where we are and the capacities that are beginning to emerge. But they never fail to point the way forward. And in the letter of December 31st to the Conference of the Boards of Counselors, this is very much the case, where the House writes, gratified as we are by the progress made, it is evident that a most formidable task lies ahead if each national Baha'i community is to fulfill the aspirations from the movement of clusters that it set for itself when the plan began. There is an urgent need to cultivate more broadly the capacities that are required to intensify a program of growth. We have observed with particular interest how a pronounced community spirit can increasingly be felt among all those involved in the pattern of activity in third milestone clusters, even when it is not very strong in the wider society. It is often expressed as a feeling of belonging and a sense of common endeavor and mutual support. In their collective efforts and deliberations, the friends in such locations are increasingly occupied with cultivating spaces in which people consult and share knowledge, so the concept of learning again, derived from both science and religion, and find ways to apply that knowledge to family development, education, economic activity, public health, and other fundamental processes of community life, infusing them with a fresh spirit. So friends, what we have achieved so far in the plan now must be greatly magnified. We started the plan with 74 clusters that had, at that time, advanced beyond the third milestone. As of yesterday, we are at 111 clusters that have advanced beyond that milestone. So we've come up with 37 in the total of those 4 years. But what we now have to do, if we are to reach our goal, is to equal that amount basically every year of the next 5 years, on average, until we hit some 300 clusters that have advanced beyond that third milestone. So it's clear from that guidance how critical the capacity to learn, to generate, and to disseminate that learning will be over the course of time. Now, it's important at this juncture to say, now we talk about numbers of milestone 3 clusters, but it's not numbers so much in their own right that are the goal. It's how do we attend to the fundamental processes that actually see us with greater ability to release the society-building powers of the faith over the course of time. That's really what we're talking about. Now, numbers will show in some way, that increasing capacity, but it's not just numbers for their own sake. It's always with attention to these fundamental processes. The House of Justice, in that December 31st letter, also talks about, it's a beautiful phrase, I love it, the ecosystem of learning that needs to exist. And it's described, and I'll paraphrase it, but you see the concepts there, that at the level of a cluster, there is an ecosystem of learning. That is, ways in which people reflect together, learn together, refine their actions, invite participation, so on and so forth. Then from a cluster to an adjoining group of clusters, there's an ecosystem of learning. In the way that resources and insights are shared within a region, there is an ecosystem of learning. And then even in a nation, there's an ecosystem of learning. And it's attention to all of those things that are a primary responsibility of the institutions of the faith, but not in the sense that only they are doing the learning. Really, the learning is happening at the grassroots. It's just the institutions exist to help us to disseminate those.
America is a big place. This map shows the 785 clusters in the United States. There's the white areas, which are not clusters, so that number could grow in the future. The legend at the bottom, I've mentioned the white areas. Maybe they're not open yet, or there's no activities. Orange clusters have not advanced to a program of growth. They may have activities going on, but they may not be outward oriented. Pink clusters have passed milestone 1. This means they have at least one core activity that is outward oriented, that is bringing in people into the study circles or the devotionals. The purple, they've passed milestone 2, tens serving hundreds. So they might have 10 core activities involving hundreds of people. This is outward oriented, so they're bringing in more people from the outside community. Green clusters have passed milestone 3, hundreds serving thousands. So they have hundreds of core activities involving thousands of individuals. The goal is to raise the number of milestone 3 clusters to 300 by the end of the plan in 2031. I put Mr. Bauer's comment, a feeling of belonging, in the upper left. I feel that applies when I think of whatever I'm doing and how many other people are doing that in other places. Comment in the lower right, worldwide, there are around 22,000 clusters, with a goal of 5,000 passing the 3rd milestone by 2031. Mr. Bowers continues, advancing race unity through the action of the plan. I've outlined topics that he will address. You can follow that outline as he proceeds.
Now, the second example that I'd like to give has to do with the issue, it's connected to these enrollments, but it has to do with the issue of race unity. You probably noticed that we've just undertaken another survey of race unity activities in the country. And as of a couple of days ago, we have identified more than 650 discrete endeavors that are being undertaken by the Baha'is. And that in itself is a significant data point. Now, it's not a census. It's not every Baha'i responding. We only had about maybe 900 or so Baha'is who actually responded. And out of the 900, some of them duplicated. So it's about 670. But in one calendar year, without any extensive coordination or at the national level or the regional level, Baha'is have organized hundreds of grassroots activities to promote race unity, which is a wonderful thing. And this suggests that there is a tradition that's well established in the community to think about these things. And this culture fosters all kinds of efforts. Now, of those activities, and it's important to say that you can think about, let's say, an entire continuum, an entire spectrum of different kinds of activities. Some of them might fall more into the arena of community building. Others might fall into the arena of social action. Others might fall into the arena of discourse. And it's important to remember that it doesn't make one better than the others. One category is not better than the other categories. They're just different categories. They have different aims, they have different parameters, they have different goals, all those kinds of things. But all of them ultimately are connected with sharing the insights of the revelation of Baha'u'llah with the public. They just each have their own ways of doing that. The most prominent of these are educational workshops and classes, those that are sustained over time. And what they do is they model on many sort of classic models of education and training, but then they incorporate Baha'i insights into those models, and they go out into the world and share those things. And it's very good, very important what they're doing. But there's another category of initiative that doesn't bear the classic name of race unity activity, but is no less important, and in fact, arguably, just as important, if not more important, than anything else. And that is those kinds of activities that are fostering the coming together and creation of communities at the level of the grassroots. Now, all of these things contribute to that, but there are particular ones very associated with the Institute process. So to give a basic example of how this is, in several small cities and in neighborhoods where the Institute process has been developing, one of the things that we see is that racism plays a central role in producing civic and social landscapes that don't adequately respond to the higher aspirations of youth. And in these places, the Institute process addresses the material effects of American racism by offering youth opportunities for intellectual and spiritual engagement and channeling their vitality into acts of service. And as the youth serve, often it's by teaching children's classes or by serving as animators, they are accompanied by Baha'is who identify from many different backgrounds. Some are white, some are black, some are Persian, and so on. But all of those involved in the process grow closer to one another. And as the process advances, all involved also grow closer to the communities in which they serve. So not just among each other as friends, but with other organizations and others in the community. Often, this leads to consultation and consensus building with like-minded grassroots organizations that are experienced in addressing the effects of racism. So, in other words, people from whom we also can learn, who are doing very similar work. And friends from these organizations share insights and collaborate with us in many different ways. So this process helps us to combat the ignorance that comes from a denial of the idea that all human beings share the same spiritual essence, are members of one human family, and is supplanted as intimate relationships are established among those serving together. And these relationships are scaffolded by the curriculum that shapes the Institute process. Well, how is that? The curriculum continually impels participants to cultivate spiritual qualities that are needed to resist racism. Qualities like love, courage, wisdom, a sense of justice, and sympathy for the downtrodden. And in the United States, our Race Unity Desk has just sent us a report. There are at least 200 neighborhoods that are moving towards this dynamic process that I've just described. This is extremely important in that it's an understanding that avoids two extremes. And this is something that we've been grappling with as an American Baha'i community for quite some time, since the Institute process was established, but which the House of Justice, in its letter to us in July 2020, made very clear that really the resolution of the issue of race, which they commanded us to do, to continue to think about and did not remove as our most urgent priority, should be resolved through the framework of action of the plan. And so everything we do has to be thought of in that way. But there are extremes there that we want to also avoid, kind of pitfalls, if you will. One extreme would be to say, well, the issue of race is above everything else, and before we can do anything, we have to address the issue of race. The other extreme, though, is, no, just do the activities and take the courses. We don't have to talk about race. That's not correct either. What this does is it gives us an atmosphere and an environment where we can have those conversations. And friends, visit some of the people in the neighborhoods if you haven't. Those conversations are happening. Now, we can imagine, the young Baha'i from a Baha'i family who goes home front pioneering and full of light and full of love and full of hope, goes into a place where he encounters a completely different thing than he's ever seen in his life. Doesn't understand. A very different perspective and a very different worldview shaped by forces to which he, like say if he's a white guy like me, hasn't been subjected to. So he's going to make mistakes, and he's going to have a lot to learn. But then there's a community that hasn't had access to the revelation of Baha'u'llah. Well, they have a lot to learn. The point is, everybody has something to learn. Everyone grows together. We all learn from each other, and it's that love, that adherence to the Word of God, the willingness to serve together, to do the hard work and stick it out, that makes the difference. We can talk about 20 enrollments in San Diego, but that by no means tells you all of this other work that took place to get where they are. It's those relationships that count the most. And when you talk with them, you see it. I'll just speak for myself. I've had so many conversations with people who have grown up in some of these neighborhoods and have become Baha'is. And the impact that the faith has had on them, and I guess I would summarize it this way, noble have I created thee. Well, nobody ever hears that. Noble have I created thee. It was certainly not those people who have not had a voice in our society, who've been mistreated in our society, but then who, when they hear this, it's not someone doing this for them. It's them gaining their own sense of understanding, their own purpose, their own idea of what the possibilities are in their lives. So the frontiers of learning, we think, are likely to be discovered not just in the clusters that have moved the farthest in the continuum of growth, but also where the protagonists of the plan have made a conscious decision to work toward the elimination of racial prejudice while making significant progress on that continuum. So it's just a conversation that is part of what is done. It's not the one thing that is done, but it's like enrollments, it's an element of what is done in order to get us there. And friends, this country badly needs insights on this, badly needs insights on this. I hope this is not escaping your notice. It sounds self-referential, but I've had a lot of conversations with leading academics and people out in the wider society, and they're all quite good at diagnosing what is going on. This is bad, it's falling apart, here are the problems that we have. Virtually nothing is being said about, well, how do we get out of this? Very little of substance is being said. Well, we're beginning to be able to see things that we can show, that to tell us how to get out of this, and this is the work that we're trying to do.
The advancement in Iranian understanding of what the Baha'i faith has to offer to the future of Iran.
You may have heard about Abbas Milani, who is a very prominent academic here in the United States. He's the head of the Iranian Studies Department at Stanford University. Dr. Milani, some years ago, published a statement that he circulated very widely, calling to task the Iranian intellectual community for having ignored the Baha'is for so long. Not having ignored just their human rights, but also their contributions to the history of Iran. And he said it was from blind ignorance and prejudice that they did it. And he really called them out on it. And the title of it was "Shame on You." Shame on you. So he has, with great courage, spoken up. Now, this same Abbas Milani, 3 years ago, sponsored a conference at Stanford University on Abdu'l-Baha's visit to Stanford. It's the only such seminar that has ever happened and associated in the West with a university that Abdu'l-Baha visited. It was done by a non-Baha'i Iranian head of the Iranian Studies Department. Even when the Baha'is offered to pay for it, Dr. Milani refused. No, Stanford is doing this. It's the least we can do for the sake of the Baha'is. And in his remarks about Abdu'l-Baha, he characterized the master as Iran's greatest ever ambassador to the world. This is something, friends. And it gives you a sense of not only, we've gone past the point, at least where the leading lights are concerned, we've gone past the point of simply saying, oh, well, the Baha'is are human beings and they deserve their rights. Now we're at the point where when you hear people discussing the Baha'is, they say more than just that. It's the Baha'i faith has things to offer to the future of Iran. And when we talk about that future, Baha'is need to be at the table. You hear it all the time now. It's almost a litmus test now if you're serious about human rights, if you're an Iranian. Here's a final example of that. I won't mention the person's name because he did not go public with this. It was a private comment to a reliable source. But this report did go to the World Center. Now, the reason I'm not going to say the name is because it's a private comment, I don't have permission to publish it. So I won't, but I'll read it and let you see what it means. This is a very prominent, frequently seen commentator on Iranian issues, frequently seen in the West on television, news channels. Thinking about the Baha'i faith, he said, without wishing to sound hyperbolic, I have reflected on this matter, the matter of the faith, and have come to believe that the Baha'i faith is the only solution capable of saving Iran. Then he went on to explain why he felt that neither Islam nor Zoroastrianism nor other traditions could fulfill this role. And then he expressed the hope that some form of broad mass conversion might one day emerge. This is not a Baha'i, not even a believer, I think, like in God, but he sees the value of what the Baha'is are bringing to the table. Now, friends, we talk about the defense efforts, we talk about Persian media and all of that, but let's not be mistaken here. This is all the victory of the friends in Iran. We have this beautiful paragraph in the Rezvan message, and their efforts clearly are what have brought us here, and no doubt in some way they have brought us all the victories we've seen all around the world, as the Guardian and later the Universal House of Justice have maintained. Their behavior is a miracle of the human spirit. And posterity will note it. Their countrymen will note it. Think of a community several 100,000 strong. Not one act of violence. Not one act of retaliation. Not one act of sedition. Not one piece of paper that would prove that they're in cahoots with anybody in a political sense, right? And there they are in all their numbers, firm, adhering, continuing their work, and now seen not just as the hapless victims of persecution, but as constructive protagonists for a better Iran, even in the minds of other Iranians, not just in their own minds. This is an extremely important victory, and this mirrors what we're also beginning to see. So in a sense, our work is the same. What they're doing within their restricted circumstances is the same as what we're doing in our perfect freedom.
Now to the Treasurer's report from Muin Afnani, the National Treasurer. He speaks to material means. A couple of quotes here from Dr. Henderson, the former treasurer, still applies. When we raise material resources for our faith, we are not raising money to pay the bills. We are raising money to build the kingdom of God on earth. And he said, growth involves building capacity for more growth. Mr. Afnani begins by relating stories from the early days of the faith, including some of the earliest fundraising efforts in the Baha'i world, and he connects each story to sacrifice. He lists funds supporting the national and regional efforts. There's the Secretariat, the Treasurer's Office, the regional Baha'i councils, the regional training institutes, the Office of Public Affairs in D.C. and New York, the properties around the country, communications, IT department, legal office, operations, Baha'i Publishing Trust, insurance, Persian Baha'i Media Services, the archives, University of Maryland Peace Chair, membership and records, review offices in English and Persian, and many others. Highlight number 1, material means. He says, through a generous contribution of a beloved friend, the National Assembly is in the final days of acquiring this building. The contract has already been signed. It was the home of Mrs. Agnes Parsons, where Abdu'l-Baha stayed while visiting Washington, D.C., where he met with a number of prominent individuals, including Theodore Roosevelt. And in addition to being a place of great historical significance, it will become the new home of the Baha'i Office of Public Affairs. And it's located at 1700 18th Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., the Parsons House. And you say, where is it? Here is a map. DuPont Circle, which is a subway stop, but it's a landmark, is in the middle. Item 1 here is the current location for the Baha'i Office of Public Affairs. In its new location, once it's there, get off DuPont Circle subway, comes out right here at that incredible escalator. You go a couple blocks east on Q Street and a couple blocks north on 18th Street, and that's where it's located. You'll want to take the subway because if you look at the cost of parking, it is incredible up there. The material means highlight number 2. The National Assembly decided to set aside estate bequests into a reserve fund to lessen the future need for borrowing money and not include them in the fund goal of $52 million, which is the operational budget. At the time of the convention, estate bequests stood at $11.8 million, but by the end of the fiscal year, which was a week later, had risen to $12.7 million. This is unusually high. In the past few years, estate bequests have ranged from $2.5 to $5.5 million. Why am I telling you this story? This is a chart from a year ago, Dr. Henderson's National Convention, and he shows this graph, contributions versus operating and operational expenses. So it's in year 2024 and 2025. The red line shows what we are spending, and the blue bars track contributions. Dr. Henderson said, we are solvent on the first and last days of the year. So here's the first day, the red line touches the blue bar, and then there's this gap where we fall behind, and then we rush to catch up. And then the last day of the fiscal year, they meet each other again because we caught up. But here in the middle, we're almost $10 million short. So in the meantime, that gap, the National Assembly must borrow at high rates potentially, or liquidate investments, or rely on Baha'i loans. He said at that time, just mitigating the need to borrow will save a lot of money. So what the National has done here to take advantage of this very large set of estate bequests, that means people had to die for this to happen, is to set aside this reserve fund. And they basically solved this problem that they will be able to borrow against that because they already have the money in the bank, unless that money needs to be used to solve some other crisis. Material means highlight number 3, our aging contributor demographic. This is about you. This graph shows total contributions to the National Baha'i Fund, unrestricted, by demographic. The people aged 70 to 79 are this giant green bar, and the blue line shows the number of contributions from that demographic. Dr. Henderson a year ago said many of the most generous contributors are now entering retirement. We are challenged to develop our capacity to fund the operations of the faith from the younger demographic segments of the American Baha'i community. In the lower left, about 84% of total contributions came from friends aged 50 and older. So that would be from this green bar up through the end. In the upper left, the National Assembly has begun the process of consultation with the Continental Boards of Counselors, regional Baha'i councils, local spiritual assemblies about fund education and development, in particular for the youth and young adults. International pioneering. Response from a question to the National Secretary's report. Farih Baghdadi, a member of the National Assembly, spoke. The words in green are a summary of what she said. We were kind of asked to share this with you. Shortly after the launch of the 9-year plan, the House of Justice in 2022 assigned to our National Assembly 26 clusters in different regions of the world to receive 52 pioneers to be deployed in teams of 2. Second assignment, in 2024, the House of Justice assigned 8 countries around the world to send 200 pioneers to China, of which 80 were assigned to the U.S. The status. With regard to the 26 clusters from 2022, they wanted pioneers with the skills to advance a cluster from an earlier stage of development to 3rd milestone and beyond. A lot of Ruhi training, really. The status is, by the end of the summer, all except 4 out of the 26 clusters will have received their pioneers. The remaining 4 are Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Algeria, and Sudan is paused because of political difficulties. Now, for China, the skill they needed was experience serving as a tutor for an expanding nucleus of friends that work together to create a vibrant community life, a more general kind of skill. We were asked to read this to you because this shows the opportunity in China. An exceptional opportunity exists for young people to pioneer in China, as the Chinese government provides, in most cases, full scholarships, including the tuition, fees, room, and board for studying in their universities and colleges. In some cases, the studies are done fully in English, so language won't be an initial obstacle for them to start their studies. For other professionals, there are many other work opportunities in China. So spread that word. Those interested should write to pioneer@usbnc.org. Now we're on Saturday. The morning is the election of the National Assembly after the devotional program, open consultation, convention photo, consultation on insights from the efforts of individuals, presentation by the Board of Trustees of Hakukala, the teller's report, introduction of the newly elected National Assembly, retirement testimonials for June Thomas, and handout of the new NSA statement, A Common Endeavor. Election of the National Spiritual Assembly. The tellers prepare for balloting. The chief teller reads instructions. Other tellers read quotations about elections and provide ballots and envelopes where needed. Should sound familiar. A silent and prayerful atmosphere is established. Once everyone is ready, convention chair calls each delegate alphabetically to place their vote in the clear plexiglass ballot box. Absentee ballots are placed into the ballot box by the chief teller as those delegates' names are called. A standing ovation erupts when the voting is complete. A reverent and spiritual atmosphere was treated by all as sacred. We were provided with photos of every one of the 160 delegates voting in person. So I made a video out of them. You will see the chief teller appear 11 times to drop in the 11 absentee ballots. This is alphabetical order by last name. Look at the screen. It's a silent movie. And the chief teller picks up the ballot box, takes it off for counting. The group photo of the attendees at the National Convention, along with guests and a few staff members from the National Center. Delegate demographics, upper left age range. In the 20s, 1. In their 70s and 80s, 51. That's the box I'm in. Number of years served as delegate, first time delegate, 13. 20 or more years, that's the box I'm in, 14. Race, ethnicity, American Indian or Native American, 2. Delegates by gender, female, male. There is maybe a trend toward more women. First time delegates, male, female. I don't think I see a trend there. Delegates who spoke at the convention. You see the total number. Last year it was low. This year the counselors did not speak hardly ever, just once, I think. The counselor got up. Part of that is they give the delegates more time to speak. Voting by absentee ballot, around 10, but they don't really know. It was estimated to be 8 and it became 11. People had to leave early in some cases. Presentation by the Board of Trustees of Hahukala. Several board members present, 3 of them spoke. A highlight from one of those talks begins by quoting Baha'u'llah, "Say, O people, the first duty is to recognize the one true God. The second is to show forth constancy in his cause, and after these, one's duty is to purify one's riches and earthly possessions according to that which is prescribed by God.
The beloved Universal House of Justice tells us that Hukukula is a great law and a sacred institution, laid down in the most holy book. It is one of the key instruments for constructing the foundation and supporting the structure of the world order of Baha'u'llah. It has far-reaching ramifications that extend from promoting the welfare of the individual to buttressing the authority and extending the activity of the head of the faith. One of the key instruments, not a peripheral duty, not an optional practice for the financially comfortable, but one of the key instruments for constructing a new world. And the House of Justice further tells us that this institution, that this mighty law will contribute to the spiritualization of humanity through the promotion of a new attitude to the acquisition and use of material resources. And it will provide the material means necessary for great collective enterprises designed to improve all aspects of life and serve as a powerful element in the growth of a world civilization. But to understand how it transforms us, we must first ask a more basic question. What is a divine law? We live in a culture that understands law primarily as constraint. We must do this. We must not do that. And without even noticing it, we can carry that same attitude of constraint into our spiritual lives. Yet Baha'u'llah offers us something very different. Think not that we have revealed unto you a mere code of laws. Nay, rather, we have unsealed the choice wine with the fingers of might and power. Divine law is not constraint. It is an offering. It is the choice wine given to souls that long for transformation. And we observe divine laws out of love. He says, observe my commandments for the love of my beauty. Not to prove obedience, not merely to satisfy your requirement, not to avoid punishment, but out of love. And specifically with respect to this mighty law, the House of Justice tells us it is love for Baha'u'llah, which will be the primary motive for the Friends in obeying this law. This shift in orientation from constraint to transformation is not minor. It is foundational. It recasts law from obligation into relationship. And like any true relationship, it unfolds over time. And it's a relationship expressed through action. Action driven by the love of God. Action shaped by effort, struggle, and persistence. Abdu'l-Baha tells us, thou who art afire with the love of God, deep sincerity in the cause of God, thy persevering steps along the pathway of his kingdom, and thy staunchness in his faith. For of all great things, this is the greatest in his sight. He will make thine inner eye to see with the light of knowledge. He will forgive thy sins and transform them into goodly deeds. Sincerity, perseverance, faithfulness in the face of difficulty. This is when transformation begins. Even our shortcomings are not wasted. Even our sins, we are told, can be transformed into goodly deeds. And we are told of such souls that they are not swept off course by the world's unabating distractions. Steady do they go, patient and perseverant, pledged to long-term endeavor. And in the company of many others, they are building havens of peace. This is the horizon in which this law must be understood. It is part of the education of souls learning to live in a new way. This is the kind of human being required in a disordered age. This is the beginning of a reorientation of the whole life, the transformation of a soul that can live in the world without being consumed by it. And many are being transformed each day. I want to share some reflections from friends studying Ruhi Book 11. One wrote, The study of the law of Kuhukula helped me reimagine my personal, joyful relationship with the head of the faith, the Universal House of Justice, serving as a direct link between me and the Universal House of Justice. Can you imagine that? Another wrote, "What I did not expect was that studying this book would change my inner world. The transformative effect of Hukukula has changed my life." A third wrote, "Understanding this law has made me gain a greater appreciation for Baha'i law and the respect and trust that are given to us." And then there was a young woman. She had not been deeply engaged in the institute process, but she had a great love for social justice. Someone invited her. She came, she engaged, and at the end, she stood up and said, "The learning has increased my love for the Universal House of Justice so intensely that I can feel it pounding in the center of my chest." She is now a tutor. She's now actively involved in the activities of the cause. Friends, she did not change in isolation. She changed, and then she turned towards others. And perhaps this is always how transformation moves. The transformation of a single heart does not stay contained. It reaches outward. It touches others. It multiplies.
The teller's report. Delegates eligible to vote, 171. Those voting in person, 160. Voting absentee, 11. Invalid ballots, 0. Invalid votes, 0. Total votes cast, 1,539. Elected, Kenneth Bowers, Nanaba Khan Foguth, Safir Rameshfar, Rabi Musa Muin Afnani, Timothy Conley, David Young, Fariba Akhtazi, and the new member, Danita Brown. When I added the number of votes for those 9, it was 1,013, meaning 526 votes were for other people. David Young is now the longest serving member of the National Assembly, first elected in 1999. Introduction of the newly elected National Spiritual Assembly. They have already met at this point and have elected their officers. Dr. Young is introducing them that way. Here the counselors have joined them on the stage. Timothy Conley, Nanaba Khan Foguth, Safir Rameshfar continues as the Assistant Secretary. David Young continues as the Chair. Rabi Musa continues as Vice Chair. Fariba Akhtazi. Ken Bowers continues as Secretary. The new member, Danita Brown. And Muin Afnani continues as Treasurer. Retirement of Dr. June Manning Thomas. In March, delegates received this email. The National Assembly has accepted Dr. June Thomas's request to be relieved from membership on the National Assembly as of Rizwan 2026. Therefore, Dr. Thomas will not be eligible for election at the National Convention. Members of the National Assembly offered tributes, and there was a video which was not distributed. Dr. Thomas's family members were present and sat up front. Her husband, Dr. Richard Thomas, Professor Emeritus of History at Michigan State University, well known in the Baha'i community, was present. June and Richard have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. They are members of the Ann Arbor, Michigan Baha'i community. Nanaba Khan Foguth. From an indigenous framework, we honor our elders. In June's semi-autobiographical book of school desegregation in South Carolina, and that is the book Struggling to Learn, An Intimate History of School Desegregation in South Carolina by June Manning Thomas. She details her experience as one of the first students to integrate Orangeburg High School. This profound sense of hardship as a young person really resonated and still resonates in her approach with young people, including their voices in every step. You can hear that in the experiences when she shares what she heard from the voices of youth in Flint, Michigan. Safira Rameshfar, this is just part of her statements. June and I had the joy of being the two National Assembly members who got to visit the youth in Atlanta with Councilor Silva. There were some youth from Atlanta and Flint who met and talked about how the Institute process ties to the civil rights movement. As part of that visit, we went to visit the Martin Luther King Museum together and Ebenezer Baptist Church. I had the joy of getting a personal tour from June and the history. June was there for Martin Luther King's funeral in 1968. The stories she was able to tell and the beautiful connection to history through June's eyes were very striking. June Thomas gives her remarks. I point out under her picture that in her day job, she is Professor Emeritus of Urban and Regional Planning at the University of Michigan. She begins by asking herself a question. What is the most important lesson that I learned about the World Order of Baha'u'llah by serving as a National Assembly member? And she answers this way. I would say that I have gained such insight into the beauty of the Universal House of Justice. That's the biggest lesson. We know this is a body that is freed from error, that it's a special body, but I had no idea of the love and care that they take of their national assemblies, especially their leading national assemblies like us. There's frequent communication. There's times we would meet and had a problem and didn't know what to do, and Ken would say, I have a conversation next week. He had a contact person in Haifa. Talk about pull. And then I began to become aware. They have offices assigned to work with and nurture specific aspects of national assemblies. Who knew? They have specific materials to help national assemblies do the work they're supposed to do. Did you know that? No. See? Just the scheme of worldwide advancement that they have laid down for us, the more I served, the more I fell in love with the House of Justice. This is the beauty of this era, that we have this great bounty. The National Assembly statement on the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, a common endeavor realizing the promise of America. Mr. Bowers gives the backstory. He mentions the lead up to last year's Building America's Future live stream from the National Convention. It involved interaction with the House of Justice to more and more take a position of thought leadership. They had decided a year ago that they were going to write and distribute this statement to the American people. It would capture the storyline, where did we come from? Who are we now? Where are we going? They decided to turn it over to the Public Affairs Office to write it. That office convened Baha'i scholars, counselors, and other experts. They got a lot of help, not to change the message, but to make it more understandable to the public. He said, you're about to see the result. It's ready to go out. It can be a resource to help initiate conversations. He's told us to integrate it into what is already happening. It's not its own special thing. It is a tool. And he said, thank you to Public Affairs. We learned a lot. It put us on a different footing. A 12-minute video was played of the statement being read. We have access to that on the website, www.acommonendeavor. It's being passed out. Here's Public Affairs staff, PJ Andrews, and other staff members handing out piles. We had not seen it until this moment. And simultaneously, the statement was sent out to the American Baha'i community via emails. This was 8:30 p.m. Central Time. If you look at the email when you got it, it says 9:30 on the Eastern Time, because it went out right at this moment. Individuals were all curious to get their copy. This was quitting time. There was no discussion. We just got it. It's now Sunday, and it's a short day. One of the highlights, the lightning round, 30-second comments about the convention process. You can say what you liked, what you didn't like, give suggestions. Concluding remarks by the counselors, and the convention adjourns at noon. Letter from the convention to the House of Justice. I mentioned earlier that the writing team was appointed right at the beginning, and they had 3.5 days to write the letter. Here's the writing team. These 4 people on the left: Netta Spindon, Beverly Moore, Adib Shafipur, and David Gillette, the tall guy. They come up and read their draft letter aloud to the convention, and it's really good. Delegates come to the microphone and suggest edits, but they're minor. It takes them a little bit more to finalize it, but then it's handed out, and it really summarizes the convention very well. 2-page letter. I know David Gillette. I asked him, how did you find time to write such a great letter in your spare time? Because we know there's no spare time when you're at the convention. And he said, well, it was the young guy. The young guy pretty much drafted it, and we just helped him. I want to draw your attention to the young guy because he's going to show up again. The letter went to the House of Justice, and then 2 weeks later, May 11th, they responded. And I'm not going to read it all. You can find it if you want on the national website. But the first line, the message received from the delegates to your national convention thrilled our hearts. I heard from a National Assembly member after this. They didn't remember them ever using this phrase before, thrilled our heart. That was memorable. Highlights. The first is from the young guy, Adib Shafipour, Houston, Texas.
So I wanted to share a bit about a very unique institution of the local assembly of Houston. I've been told by the national staff we're one of the younger assemblies in the country. There's about 800 Baha'is, and only one person is over 50. Everyone else on the assembly is below that age. There are 3 youth. I'm one of them, and I happen to be the chair. God help me. When we talk about this ecosystem of learning, one thing that our assembly reflected on was actually the example of ourselves. All of us are either tutors, animators, or children's class teachers. How do we expect our community to embrace the plan if as assembly members, we don't embrace the plan? So in every neighborhood of intense activity, even neighborhoods that are trying to emerge as neighborhoods of intense activity, there is an assembly member there working in that neighborhood as an animator, a tutor, or a children's class teacher. This is the first characteristic or element that helps this ecosystem of learning. The second is when our assembly consulted, we said like there are a lot of formal structures maybe in our city because we're very youthful, right? Like we have a committee for, I don't know, planning holidays, we have a committee for marriages, we have a committee for this and that. All of these committees should be connected to one of the courses of the Institute that correspond to what they're doing. So if you're the marriage committee, you need to be doing book 12 systematically with everybody. If you're the local office of public affairs, book 14. If you're on the treasury, book 11. If you're accompanying a feast, book 10. And if you're also a youth, maybe working with youth, maybe book 8, because we need to be consecrated in the covenant, right? So I think this is another element that we have thought that is helpful for our ecosystem of learning. The third is like the delegate from New York shared, we really try to believe in the youth. So like, yes, a 17-year-old can coordinate their feast. What does that look like? How is that going to appear? And there will be elders that have a problem with it, about the changes that they make. And we have to be okay with that. Even some elders will come to assembly members and say, you should resign. You're not old enough. You don't know what you're doing. But we have to not look with the eye of imperfection. They're just trying to help, right? So we have to let that go when that comes and be wise about why that's happening. Because change is difficult. So we have to acknowledge that it's difficult for these friends. The other thing that helped with our ecosystem of learning is like our collaboration with our area teaching committee. It happens that 2 of the members of the assembly are on the area teaching committee and they're below the age of 50. And so we're thinking like one cycle we spent just reading reality. There was no goal. It was just go visit every single activity that's already happening. What are we doing? How are we learning? How do they consult? How do they reflect? How do they make plans? And so then the question at the top of our mind is about structure and culture. How are we adapting the appropriate structure to create the culture that we want to create? And so it reminds me of like the guidance when it says, in the natural environment, combinations and connections create vibrancy and new life. Likewise, a flourishing process of learning arises from countless formal and informal interactions and their emergent properties. So we're thinking about what are the conversations, what are the interactions, both formal and informal, that contribute to this ecosystem of learning. How does an assembly of younger people try to help an entire community without getting unfocused or lost? And so these are just some of the insights that we have found to be helpful.
Minneapolis, Minnesota, Emily Jane Wright, unprecedented challenges again. I put in a map of downtown Minneapolis showing the location of the Minneapolis Baha'i Center and locations where George Floyd was killed, where Renee Good was killed, where Alex Preddy was killed, all within 2 miles of the Minneapolis Baha'i Center.
This report is in response to how institutions and individuals can support one another to release the society-building powers of the faith. Minneapolis and St. Paul again faced unprecedented challenges this year. In August, there was a school shooting at a school and 2 school children were killed and 21 were injured. In January, Operation Metro Surge began, which included the killing of Renee Good and Alex Pretty. And it included the freezing of federal funding for childcare. People from within and outside of the area asked, what are the Baha'is doing to respond? The Minneapolis Assembly consulted, and the outcome of this consultation was to send letters and messages of love to the children, the families, the school, and individuals in the area, and to encourage Baha'is to assist their neighbors and community members through existing efforts of children's classes, junior youth gatherings, devotionals, and home visiting. Many Baha'is deepened relationships with those around them and served their neighborhoods in numerous ways. A Baha'i who runs a daycare in St. Paul testified in front of the Minnesota legislature about the sacred value of our children and the importance of valuing and protecting our youngest community members. The children and junior youth had food drives and also had deep discussions about what is social action. These individual actions inspired the Assembly of Minneapolis to write to the community a number of letters shared via email and at feast, saying in part, "Dear friends, this has been a very difficult time for our city. Many in our community are deeply involved in supporting neighbors and are finding additional ways to connect and support each other. We have received notes from assemblies and individual Baha'is from around the country, voicing their support for our community. We are holding each of you in our hearts and prayers. The Assembly would love to hear how you are doing and how you are connecting with those around you. Our upcoming reflection meeting will focus on how you are finding ways to connect with your neighbors and community." As a result of these turbulent events, many individuals were isolated and afraid to go outside, especially immigrants and people of color. Businesses closed for hours or days at a time, and some have still not reopened. Families were too scared to shop for groceries. Schools needed to quickly pivot to an online learning model, which had been developed during COVID. Hundreds and then thousands of neighbors began to accompany students and staff to school. Mutual aid and support groups quickly formed to organize these efforts through the Signal app and WhatsApp, and many Baha'is joined these efforts. The Assembly began meeting at the home of one of our members who was too afraid to drive due to the color of her skin. The response of individuals in reaching out to their neighbors to check in on them, to host front yard bonfires, to show up for one another, to reach out to protect one another and offer a safe haven and a listening ear for one another was inspiring, and these neighborhood connections have continued to deepen and grow. The concept of home visiting and being a haven of safety for others, truly understanding and loving our neighbors, was put to the test during this year. Renee Good and Alex Pretty and the children of Annunciation School were all killed within blocks of the Minneapolis Baha'i Center. The community continues to ponder and take action on the necessary steps toward truly understanding the ideas of oneness and justice that Baha'u'llah's message calls us to embody.
Every year for 20 years, when I see Morris Taylor at the National Convention, I tell him how his book saved my life. Morris Taylor is a consultant specializing in the design and delivery of workshops for business managers and supervisors. A former auxiliary board member and international pioneer, he has worked with numerous spiritual assemblies in the U.S. and abroad. He's an efficiency expert. So the book, Helping Joe Strong, came out in 1997, is a story of a Baha'i who is frustrated by the ineffectiveness of the local spiritual assembly on which he serves. Joe's frustration leads him to contact a neighboring assembly that seems to function more effectively. Joe learns the secrets of their success and introduces to his own assembly techniques of effective time management, goal setting, laying out well-defined agendas and tracking everything from the minutia of administration to large teaching projects. The things that we've adopted in Greenbelt, every meeting has a handout, contains the minutes from the last meeting, the task facilitation list derived from the minutes, the correspondence tally for the upcoming meeting, and then the agenda is derived from that. Before that, my secretary stuff was a mess, and now it is a handout. Heidi Parsons, brilliant Star Associate Editor. Some of you may know her mom and dad, Fred and Pat O'Brien, lived in Montgomery County, Maryland in the 70s. Pelu and I remember them as the officiants at our wedding in 1978. She was in my first Baha'i school class at the DC Center that I was recruited to be a teacher for in the 70s. She was handing out Brilliant Star magazines. I asked her about the Dungeons and Dragons thing. So she was telling me about their version of that, Lightning and Luna, two siblings who make a great superhero team. So look at Brilliant Star. It's really quite hip. My 10-minute visit to the Welcome Center near the House of Worship. If you've been there, it looks the same, but new features. This was a board that had information about the Baha'i faith in other languages, the same pamphlet in 15 languages. And here was a bulletin board that said, world peace is not only possible, but inevitable. What can you do to help bring about world peace? Visitors to the Welcome Center have left their ideas. Colby Jeffers was there as a delegate from Arizona. You know his rap concert. Colby is the next speaker. He's going to rap his message, but with help. He invites Tim Conley to be the human beatbox. In rap music, a beatbox is the vocal art of creating drum beats, rhythm patterns, and musical effects using only the mouth, lips, tongue, and voice. Tim comes up and nails it. He seems to be able to do anything. Explaining recent loss of 2 Baha'i email lists. We have noticed that Virginia Announce and Maryland Announce have stopped working, while DC Announce continues to work. At the National Convention, I brought this up with Matt Weinberg. He reminded me that the Baha'i Computer and Communications Association, BCCA, closed down in 2015 after 23 years of volunteer efforts, and the services it had been providing were continued in a variety of ways. For instance, Baha'i email lists in the U.S. were taken on by individual initiative operating the Baha'i.email domain. So I sent my question to listmaster at Baha'i.email and received this response. Hi there. The Virginia and Maryland lists were discontinued due to lack of use over an extended period. Based on feedback, it was found that Baha'is living in that general area were being best served by the DC announced list. I'm happy to create cluster lists, but not resurrect the Virginia and Maryland state lists. Tom Fillmore, listmaster. The way that anybody, it seems like, can subscribe to any list at Baha'i.email is by sending the name of the list they want to join, their name, their email address, and their Baha'i ID, if known, sounds optional, to listmaster at Baha'i.email. So if anybody wants to have a campaign to try to recruit, I will help you. Last highlight, shuttle bus conversations. I'm sitting with Dr. Billy Roberts, former counselor, former National Assembly member, former treasurer of the National Assembly, pioneer to Bermuda, and now delegate from Massachusetts. This guy is fabulous, as sharp as can be. It was just a pleasure to talk to him. Log into www.baha'i.us and click on your profile to do maps. Click on coverage of the American Baha'i for the convention, and you'll see the 8 articles with pictures, the 4 videos, of which I showed you some parts, and the 22 audio tracks. I played 3 of them for you. Hopefully you felt like you were there.